Her laughter came first. Soft, familiar, then wrong. It rolled out of the frosted glass office door with sweetness that made my stomach turn. I froze, my hand still raised a knock. The nameplate read, Martin Keller, Regional Director. Behind it, my wife's voice breathless. I'd come to surprise her. She left her scarf in my car that morning. Cashmere, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy. I thought it'd be sweet. Drop it off, maybe grab lunch together at that Italian place she loved. The one with the terrace overlooking the harbor. But the sound I heard behind that door, that low, smug male chuckle answering her whisper, it hollowed me out like ice water through my veins. Then I heard my name, not lovingly, mockingly. "Caleb's too decent to suspect a thing," Martin murmured, his voice laced with that lazy arrogance only men drunk on power can carry. "Too busy grinding away, trying to prove something to everyone. He'll never see this coming." A silence followed, broken only by the creak of leather and a muffled gasp that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't open the door right away. I stood there for a full minute, every second carving itself into my chest like a blade. My hand trembled. My breath came shallow. When I finally pushed the door open, they both froze, Martin behind his mahogany desk, my wife, Elena, buttoning her blouse, her cheeks flushed not with shame but irritation. Her eyes met mine, and something in her face shifted. Not guilt, not even surprise. Annoyance, like I'd interrupted her at work. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" she stammered, but there was no remorse in it, just calculation. Martin leaned back in his chair, smirking, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked at me the way a king might look at a servant who'd wandered into the throne room. "You really should knock, son," he said coolly, straightening his tie like we'd been discussing quarterly reports. Common courtesy and all that. And that was the moment my world cracked in half. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't even try to deny it. Elena just sat at the edge of our bed, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone while I packed a bag with trembling hands, throwing clothes into a suitcase like I was running from a fire. "It didn't mean anything," she said finally, in a tone so casual it could have been about a missed meeting. "You've been distant, Caleb. Always tired. Always at the office." I needed to feel wanted. I stared at her, my hands freezing mid-motion. My mouth was dry. My hands shook. I was tired because of him. I said quietly, my voice cracking at the edges, "I've been working overtime to keep up with Martin's impossible deadlines. 60-hour weeks. So you could have the life you said you wanted. The house, the vacations, the security." She sighed, bored, like I was explaining something she'd already decided didn't matter. "You always think everything's about you," she said, not even looking up from her phone. "Maybe if you had a little confidence, you wouldn't be so easy to overlook. Martin actually sees me. He makes me feel alive." It wasn't just betrayal. It was gaslighting wrapped in silk and perfume. It was her rewriting our entire story in real time, making my sacrifice into my failure. And the way she said it, so calm, so entitled, made me realize she'd already lived in this life for weeks, maybe months. I left the apartment that night with nothing but my car keys, my phone, and my father's old leather jacket. When elevator doors closed, I caught a reflection in the mirror behind me, still sitting there, scrolling, like my pain was background noise to a song she wasn't listening to. That was the last time I saw her as the woman I'd married. 2 days later, Martin called me into his office. No mention of what happened. No hint of remorse. No acknowledgement that he'd slept with my wife on his Italian leather sofa while I was working late on his projects. He smiled that politician smile, the kind that hides knives. "Caleb," he said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from him, "about the promotion we discussed 6 months ago, the one I said was yours to lose, the boards decided to go another way." I didn't react. I'd learned by then Martin liked reactions. They fed his ego like oxygen fed fire. He continued, leaning back in his chair like a man, without a care in the world. "You've been a valuable asset. But lately I've noticed distraction, slipping performance. You understand how that looks, right? In a company this size, perception is everything. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, playing the role of concerned mentor. You're a good man, Caleb. Decent, loyal, but not everyone's cut out for management. Some of us lead, others follow, and there's no shame in that. Not everyone can handle the weight of power. It took everything in me not to hit him. Instead, I smiled, a quiet, deadly smile I didn't recognize as my own. Yes, sir, I said. I understand completely. He thought he'd broken me. He had no idea what he'd just created. My name is Caleb Rivers, 32 years old, project manager at Solvent Dynamics, a mid-tier consulting firm that handled everything from IT infrastructure to business restructuring. I'd built my career brick by brick, the kind of worker who stayed late, picked up the slack, never complained, never asked for credit. Martin Keller was the kind of boss who thrived on loyalty, but only when it benefited him. He was charming to superiors, cruel to subordinates, and brilliant at playing both sides. He'd been regional director for 4 years, and in that time, he transformed himself into a corporate god, or so he believed. Elena met him at the company gala 2 years ago. I remember that night like a photograph that's been looked at too many times. She wore a navy dress, midnight blue, like the ocean at dusk. Her hair fell in waves past her shoulders. She glowed like she'd been lit from within. I finally understand why you love your job so much, she whispered to me that night, watching Martin across the room as he charmed the CFO's wife. I thought she meant the work, the innovation, the challenge. I didn't realize she meant him. Looking back, there were signs. Late-night strategy dinners that ran until 11. Her new perfume, something expensive, musky, nothing like the vanilla scent she'd worn for 7 years. The way she flinched when I mentioned his name, like his very existence made her nervous. I ignored them all, because love makes you stupid. And trust, real wholehearted trust, is the slowest form of suicide. I didn't go home that first week after finding them. I stayed at my friend Derek's place, crashing on his couch, pretending to be fine while inside I was disintegrating. Derek didn't ask questions. He just left coffee on the table and space in his life for my grief. That Friday, I went to the office. I sat at my desk like nothing had happened, answering emails, attending meetings, watching Martin stride through the office like he'd conquered kingdoms. Elena floated past me in the hallway. She'd been hired in the PR department as a consultant, which was really Martin's way of keeping her close, keeping her visible, keeping her as a trophy. They weren't hiding it anymore. At the quarterly meeting, Martin stood at the podium announcing a new initiative, one that, ironically, I had built from scratch over 4 months of midnight coding and strategic planning. The initiative that would have secured my promotion, the one Martin had smiled at and said, "Beautiful work, Caleb. This is exactly what we need." But when he gave credit, he smiled at Elena. "Behind every great man," he said into the microphone, his arm around her waist, "is a brilliant woman who believes in him." The applause was thunderous. Mine was silent when his hand lingered too long on her back, and she smiled up at him in that way, like he hung the stars and orchestrated the moon. I realized something that crystallized in my chest like ice forming on still water. They both thought I'd disappear quietly, that I was too decent, too mild-mannered, too broken to fight back, that I would take my pain home and let it consume me in private while they celebrated in public. But as the cameras flashed and Martin shook hands with the board, I caught my reflection in the glass wall behind him. My eyes were cold, steady, seeing, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty, this story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The office at midnight smells like printer toner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hum like a distant insect. I sit alone at my desk, the one they'd moved closer to Martin's so he could monitor my work, and my fingers flip through spreadsheets the way other men flip through old photographs. Careful, reverent, scanning for what others miss. Martin bragged that he never left traces. He liked to say it in meetings, with his palms up like a magician revealing an empty hand. He was wrong. People who build empires with other people's labor leave fingerprints. On expense reports, on vendor contracts, in the margin notes of careless assistants. I've learned to read margins. I find a vendor invoice padded twice the normal amount, stamped with Martin's initials. A night log meeting that doesn't exist in the company calendar. A transfer to a shell company. Triaxis Consulting, tucked between legitimate entries, like a secret note in a library book. I save everything. PDFs, screenshots, emails that smell like perfume and arrogance. I make copies in 3 places. An encrypted folder on a rented cloud account, a flash drive locked in my glove compartment, and a printed binder in a storage unit near the river. Each copy is a promise. When Lauren drops off the new intern manual the next morning, "Oh, I thought you might want this," she says, eyes wide and curious. She doesn't know she's handed me another loose thread. Lauren Reed is 23, sharp, observant. She notices things. On her first day, she whispered to me as we passed in the hallway, "Does everyone here act like he's the King of England, or is it just Mondays?" I'd smile for the first time in weeks. I tuck the manual into my bag and leave. There's also Darren from legal, quiet, gray at the temples, the kind of man who reads contracts like scripture. He's been at the company so long his loyalty is institutional. I find him at the coffee machine one morning and drop a hypothetical across the counter. Hypothetically speaking, I say, what if someone in leadership was diverting funds through vendors? Shell companies. Things that don't add up. He laughs at first. Then I slide a spreadsheet across, and I watch his laugh die like a candle in the wind. "This could bury us all," he says quietly. He doesn't ask how I got it. He only nods and walks away, and I know he's in. By the end of the week, I have a small constellation of people who don't know they're part of the plan. Lauren's curiosity, Darren's legal brain, a junior accountant named Mike who hates being lied to, and my own careful, patient hand. We begin to stitch the paper trails into a pattern. We mark dates, align invoices, find an accounting code repeated in the shell company, one no one had bothered to mask. It's sloppy arrogance, and arrogance is easy to topple. I send an anonymized email to compliance inbox, pointing out a possible irregularity in the vendor relationships. I hit send and don't breathe for 30 seconds. The machinery has begun. Martin is a hurricane in a tailored suit. When he senses wind, he walks into it, preening as though storms only exist to blow attention toward him. He starts to suspect. First, subtle things. A glance held too long across a meeting table. A terse email to HR. A 2-hour call with the CFO that ends in clip curses. He cannot find the leak because the leak is 1,000 tiny cuts, not a single gushing pipe. His mask begins to slip. His voice hardens. His laughter becomes brittle. He starts snapping at people over trivial things. The charming regional director is replaced by something hungrier, darker, more desperate. At home, his relationship with Elena crumbles like old paper. I catch him in the lobby one afternoon, speaking to no one, jaw clenched. "Someone's out to make me look weak," he mutters into his phone. He sounds small, terrified. For a moment, I see the boy behind the mask, hungry, terrified of being ordinary, of being forgotten, of being just another face in a crowd. Then he looks up and sees me, and the mask snaps into place. Cruelty returns like mercury. Elena unravels the way silk does when caught on something sharp. She plays her role perfectly at work, distressed in meetings, acquiescent in public. But there are tremors beneath her smile. At a luncheon, she presses her napkin into her fingers until the linen puckers. Later, she avoids Darren's eye and her voice cracks when she speaks in a company meeting about the audit. She tells herself rationalizations. He gives me security. We deserve better. This is temporary. But when she's alone, she fingers the necklace I bought her as if testing whether it is weight, whether it still means something. I watch her once from across the elevator, her lips moving like a woman inventing words to steady herself. And for the first time, I feel something other than rage. Pity, maybe, or recognition that we're both trapped in a narrative neither of us wrote. I send her a professional email, a note praising a PR draft sheet innocently credited to Martin. I make sure the CFO sees it. She thanks me in the break room, and her gratitude nearly breaks me. "Thank you," she whispers, and her eyes search mine for something. Forgiveness, maybe. Understanding. I nod and walk away, leaving her standing alone with the weight of what she's become. There are moments when all the planning feels obscene, like playing chess in a room where a man's life burns. I quiet the voice that asks whether I'm becoming the thing I despise. The answer comes when I think of Elena's bored voice that night. You always think everything's about you, and the casual cruelty that turned our marriage into background noise. I think of my father's hands, calloused, honest, and I keep walking. My weapon is not malice. It's truth. Truth, laid bare, has a way of doing more damage than any roar. We stage a test. Darren plants a paper trail that looks like a routine vendor overcharge. We leak a question to the compliance inbox timed with a monthly audit. We do it small, deliberate. So when they dig deep. Martin reacts like a man who's been burned by his own arrogance. He lurches from denial to fury. He schedules a meeting with the board for damage control, insists on taking the lead in the audit. And in that hunger to control, he makes mistakes. Rash approvals, curt emails, a late-night call with a vendor pushing a signature he didn't have a right to sign. We watch and record. Everything he touches becomes evidence because he cannot help himself. Narcissists reveal themselves when cornered, too proud to play it safe. That evening, Elena cries, "True, raw, not performance." She calls me. I almost don't answer, but I do. "Caleb," she says, and her voice is fractured. "I didn't think he'd ever do anything this stupid. I thought he was smarter than this." "He is," I say quietly, "but he's not smarter than his own ego." A long silence follows. Then softly, "What are you gonna do?" "What's right?" I say, and I end the call. The boardroom smells like cold coffee and tension. Every glass panel reflects the morning light like a blade. Executives sit stiff-backed, whispering over folded hands. Martin stands at the head of the table, his ties slightly askew, the first crack in his immaculate armor. He's been awake for nights. His eyes are rimmed in red, his voice roughened by desperation and something that looks like fear. "These accusations are baseless," he says, trying to summon authority, but his words tremble at the edges like leaves in an October wind. "I built this company. Without me, there is no solvent dynamics." The chairman, calm, detached, the kind of man who's seen this dance before, slides a folder across the mahogany table. "Then perhaps you can explain why your signature appears on falsified invoices linked to Triaxis Consulting?" he asks, his voice gentle as a blade. "A company that exists only to funnel money into accounts we cannot trace?" The air thickens. Papers shuffle. Someone coughs. Martin's mouth opens, closes. Sweat beads along his temple like morning dew. And then, without looking at anyone, I say quietly from my seat in the back of the room, "Maybe you should ask him where he told Elena to hide the backup drives." Every head turns. Even the air seems to stop breathing. Martin's gaze snaps to me, disbelief flashing into rage, so pure it's almost beautiful. "You!" he hisses, and there's murder in his voice now. "You did this. You're nothing, a ghost in my company. A man too weak to keep his own wife. I'm the reason they still have a company to save." I say softly, meeting his eyes, "You're the reason they don't." The chairman presses a button. On the projector screen, emails begin to appear. His own words, his instructions, his arrogance immortalized in print. Delete the vendor logs. Reclassify the expense under R&D. Tell her to keep quiet. She's not smart enough to connect the dots anyway. We'll ride this out. No one will ever know. Each line strips another layer off him. The polished, charming executive peeling away until only the liar remains. Martin lunges toward the laptop, but security intercepts him. His voice breaks like cheap pottery. "You think you're better than me? You think this place runs without me?" No one answers. The silence is louder than any verdict. By evening, the building is chaos. Reporters crowd the lobby, their cameras like weapons waiting for blood. Security escorts Martin out through a side door, his coat wrinkled, tie gone, eyes wild with the specific madness of a man watching his empire collapse in real time. He turns once, scanning the faces of the people who once applauded him. None of them meet his gaze. His empire crumbles faster than even I expected. Investors pull out. The board suspends him indefinitely pending investigation. The CFO assumes interim control, and the company breathes for the first time in years. I walk through the empty corridors at night, my reflection flickering in the glass. Each step echoes with ghosts, of laughter that wasn't real, promises that weren't kept, late nights I spent building something someone else would claim. In Martin's office, which they've already cleared his belongings, the air smells of stale cologne and dust. His desk is empty except for one framed photo. Him and Elena retreat, smiling like a lie. I stare at it for a long time before setting it face down. My phone buzzes. It's a text from an unknown number. He's here. At the house. He's angry. Help me. It's Elena. And this is where everything gets complicated. The fire. Her house looks different at night. All those designer windows glowing with hollow light. When I arrive, Martin's car is already in the driveway. Engine still running. Headlights cutting through fog thick enough to swallow sound. The front door is open. I hear shouting, his voice sharp and cracked with rage. Hers, trembling. You ruined me, he's screaming. You made me a joke. Martin, stop, please. You think I didn't know what you were doing behind my back? Playing the innocent, batting your eyes at the board? You're a cheat, a liar, and now you even pay for this. I step inside quietly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air smells like spilled wine and fear. He's standing over her, his hands clenched into fists, his face red with fury that's burning itself into violence. Elena's back is pressed to the wall, her eyes glassy with tears. There's a bruise forming on her upper arm. Finger marks, purple and damning. Martin. My voice cuts through the chaos, steady and low. He freezes, turns. For a moment, he doesn't even look human. Just rage wearing a man's skin. You, he spits, and he moves toward me with his fists raised. You couldn't just take your little humiliation and disappear. You had to destroy everything. Everything I built. I didn't destroy anything, Martin. I say, and I don't move. You did. When you decided that other people's lives were just props in your story. He lunges, but stops when he sees the flashing lights outside. Red and blue, painting the fog like a nightmare. The police, the auditors, the cameras, the truth, waiting on the porch. Elena sinks to the floor, sobbing. Martin backs away, face collapsing into disbelief. You called them? No, I say quietly. She did. Smart girl. She learned. The door bursts open. Flashbulbs explode like lightning. Officers move through the space with practiced efficiency. The man who once told me I'd never be management material is led away in handcuffs, shouting my name like a curse. This isn't over, Rivers, he screams. You'll pay for this. You'll see. But his words are swallowed by the sound of the police car door closing, the engine starting, the world moving on without him. Elena looks at me, her face streaked with tears and something that might be gratitude or might be the final death of who she thought she was. I called them, she whispers. 20 minutes before he got here. I was done. I finally realized I was done. I nod and help her up, and we stand together in the doorway of the house she thought would save her, watching the man she thought would make her whole disappear into the night. It's been 90 days. The company has a new director now, a woman named Harris who values silence over spectacle. She's competent, fair, and has no interest in being worshipped. She offered me a partnership last week. I said yes. When she introduced me to the staff this morning, she said, "This is Caleb Rivers, the man who had the courage to tell the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent." Applause filled the room. Not the kind of applause people give a savior, but the kind they give to someone who's earned it, someone who chose to do the hard thing. Eleanor didn't come back to work. I heard she moved out of state, started therapy, is rebuilding herself from the ground up. I saw her once, outside a coffee shop downtown. She was sitting alone, reading, and she looked peaceful. Not happy, but at least at peace. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Martin's trial starts next month. His name is already a synonym for downfall. The papers run stories about the brilliant deceiver who brought himself down. He's become a cautionary tale that business schools will use for decades. The CEO who mistook invulnerability for invincibility. I don't feel satisfaction watching it happen. I feel something quieter. Relief, maybe? Or the absence of rage, which is almost the same thing. Sometimes, late at night, I stand by the glass wall in my new office and watch the city lights blur against the rain. The view is different from Martin's old office. Lower, more humble, but somehow more beautiful for it. I think about how love, loyalty, and trust can turn into weapons when handed to the wrong hands. I think about Elena's bored voice and Martin's arrogant smile. I think about all the nights I spent building something that was never mine to build. And then I think about peace. Quiet, earned, final. They said I'd never be management material. I whispered to the glass. Turns out, I was never meant to work under people like them. I was meant to rise above them. Not through anger. Not through revenge. I pause, watching my reflection. Through truth. The rain intensifies, and my reflection blurs and reforms, like a man being reborn. The city had changed since that night. Or maybe it was me. The skyline no longer looked like a battlefield. It looked like a promise. I used to walk these same streets with anger burning under my ribs, watching Martin's face on billboards, Elena's laughter echoing through glass walls I helped build. Back then, every corner reminded me of what they took, my dignity, my love, my peace. Now it's quiet. The air doesn't carry their names anymore. The company that once had Martin's face carved into its lobby plaque now bears a simple logo, neutral, modern, forward-looking. No one's face. No one's ego immortalized in stone. I didn't celebrate the night it all came crashing down. I didn't smile when the reporters chased Elena's tears or when Martin was escorted from his own boardroom in handcuffs. I just watched the fire I started burn down every illusion they built, slowly, beautifully, completely. And when it was done, I went home. The apartment was small, bare, and perfect. I made coffee, black, no sugar, and watched the sunrise for the first time in what felt like years. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove I was good enough. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to fight to exist in someone else's shadow. That's the thing about revenge. People think it's fire and fury, but when it's done right, it's peace. It's silence. It's a soft exhale when the storm passes, and you realize you survived it. Some nights, I still hear Elena's voice in my head, that smooth, venomous tone she used to twist truth into doubt. I hear Martin's laughter, his smug words about loyalty being a weakness. I hear the elevator doors closing as I left with nothing but my jacket. Then I remember the last time I saw them, their faces pale under the light of everything they tried to bury. And I let it go. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. You were right to believe in yourself. You were always worth more than they could see. I close my eyes, sip my coffee, and breathe, because after everything, the lies, the gaslighting, the ruin, I finally understand. The most beautiful revenge isn't making them fall. It's standing tall and discovering that the only approval you ever needed was your own. I learned something in that office at midnight, surrounded by spreadsheets and silence. Respect is non-negotiable. Your worth isn't defined by anyone else's seating chart. Not by who gets the credit, not by who believes you first, not by the speed of your climb. I proved that silence can be a weapon and patience can be power. What happened to me wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming the narrative I'd surrendered to people who never deserved my loyalty. If my story resonated with you, share it with someone who's been gaslit into invisibility. Tell them their silence doesn't make them weak. Tell them their boundaries don't make them difficult. Their survival makes them extraordinary. They were never the problem. The people who couldn't see their value were. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because I'll keep bringing you stories about people who stopped apologizing for taking up space, who turned humiliation into triumph, who chose to write their own endings instead of waiting for permission. Because here's the truth. The revolution happens when you decide you're worth more than their doubt. Your worth was never in question. It was only ever waiting to be remembered.